The first signs of trouble were subtle. In the vast darkness of space, where stars twinkled silently and planets moved in slow orbits, a faint signal appeared. At first, it was easy to dismiss. Astronomers and scientists on Earth often detected unusual readings, bursts of energy, strange radio waves, or faint blips from far away. But this time, something was different. The signal was deliberate. It was clear. Someone, somewhere, was calling for help. The message repeated itself in a simple pattern. Help us! Help us! There was no fluff, no coded language, no hidden meaning. It was urgent, desperate, and unmistakable. The people receiving it could feel the fear behind the sound waves. It wasn't like anything they had ever picked up before. It was not a technical glitch, not a natural phenomenon. It was real, and it was a cry for survival. Inside the control rooms on Earth, experts stared at the screens in disbelief. Rows of engineers, astrophysicists, and communication specialists huddled around terminals, listening, calculating, trying to make sense of it. Some tried to joke, saying it might be a prank from an advanced civilization playing games across the stars. But the tone was too urgent, the repetition too steady, the fear too raw. This was not a game. This was a call for help that demanded attention. The first reaction was caution. Humanity had long dreamed of contacting intelligent life beyond Earth, but the reality was frightening. What if it was a trap? What if answering this SOS put Earth at risk? For centuries, people had imagined alien life in books, movies, and stories, but now, for the first time, it was real. A real civilization somewhere in the galaxy was reaching out, hoping someone would listen. Debates erupted in government halls. Military leaders, scientists, and politicians argued late into the night. Some said Earth should respond carefully, sending only messages, maybe even probes. Others argued that the planet sending the SOS might not survive long enough for slow measures. Time, it seemed, was already running out. The signal, faint as it was, carried an urgency that could not be ignored. Meanwhile, on the streets and in homes far away from the control rooms, people began noticing unusual news reports. Headlines hinted at something extraordinary, a signal from deep space. Scientists tried to explain it in calm terms, but the curiosity and anxiety of ordinary people were immediate. The idea that someone out there was calling for help captured imaginations. Conversations started in cafes, offices, and online forums. What did this mean? Were humans really alone? And if someone needed help, should Earth act? Inside the command centers, the team analyzing the signal worked tirelessly. They traced its origin to a distant planet, many light years away. A world so far that even light itself took decades to travel from there to here. They studied the pattern, the frequency, the timing. Each discovery added more weight to the reality. This was not random. It was intelligent. It was a civilization that, by all signs, was in grave danger. The team discovered subtle details in the signal, variations in tone, pauses that seemed to indicate emotions, and repeated sequences that suggested a structured message. The words were simple, but the fear behind them was palpable. For the first time, scientists felt the raw weight of responsibility. This was not an experiment. This was someone's life, someone's planet, perhaps someone's entire civilization hanging in the balance. On Earth, the decision to act was not immediate. Leaders hesitated, fearing the unknown. The risks were enormous. Mobilizing resources to respond to a planet many light years away was unprecedented. Earth had never sent forces beyond its solar system. Ships were designed for exploration, not rescue. Soldiers were trained for defense, not interstellar intervention. And yet, the more they studied the signal, the more it became clear that waiting was not an option. The cries were too urgent, the danger too immediate. Every passing hour added pressure. Analysts warned that the SOS was not only a plea but possibly a countdown. Whatever threat the planet faced could not wait for deliberations or long planning, and slowly, reluctantly, a consensus formed. Earth would respond. Humanity would reach out, not with words alone, but with action. The call for help could not be ignored, no matter how difficult the journey or uncertain the outcome. Preparations began in secret, but news eventually leaked, sparking fascination and fear around the world. Engineers worked day and night, modifying starships to carry not only equipment but trained personnel ready for any scenario. Scientists reviewed every possible challenge: extreme weather on the alien planet, unfamiliar atmospheres, and unknown enemies. Military strategists trained crews in combat scenarios that were entirely speculative but necessary. This mission would test every part of human capability. At the same time, psychologists and counselors worked with the crews, understanding that the mental strain would be as challenging as the physical. The unknown can terrify even the bravest. Those who volunteered knew the risks, but they also understood the stakes. This was not just another mission. This was the chance to save a civilization, to answer a cry that echoed across the cosmos. As the final preparations were made, the people working behind the scenes felt a mixture of fear, excitement, and resolve. They knew history was being written, not with pen and paper, but with actions that would ripple across the galaxy. Earth was about to do something unprecedented, something that would define humanity for generations to come, and all the while, the faint signal continued to repeat. Help us. Help us! Its persistence was haunting. Every pulse, every flicker of transmission reminded Earth's teams of what was at stake. It was no longer a distant curiosity or a scientific puzzle. It was a real life depending on them, and they could not fail. In quiet moments, some of the crew stared at the stars beyond their labs and control rooms. They imagined the planet on the receiving end of the SOS, a world under threat, beings struggling to survive, counting on strangers far away to answer their desperate plea. The thought was humbling and terrifying. Humanity was stepping into the unknown, guided only by courage and the moral imperative to help. Finally, after weeks of preparation, simulations, and briefings, the first orders were given. Ships were fueled, crews assembled, and equipment loaded. The fleet that would carry Earth's hope beyond its solar system was ready. The decision had been made. There was no turning back. For the first time in human history, the call for help from a distant world would be answered, not with words alone, but with action. As the fleet's engines roared to life and the first vessels lifted off, leaving Earth behind, those watching knew that a new chapter in humanity's story had begun. A chapter defined by courage, solidarity, and the willingness to reach across the stars to save lives. The SOS had been clear, and Earth had answered. The journey was only beginning. The dangers ahead were unknown, but for the people of Earth and the beings sending the SOS, hope now existed where before there had been only despair. Humanity had chosen to act, and in doing so had declared a simple but powerful truth. When someone cries for help, Earth's warriors will listen. The decision to respond to the SOS had been made, but making a decision was one thing. Acting on it was another. As soon as Earth's leaders agreed that help was necessary, the real work began. The magnitude of the mission was staggering. No one had ever sent a fleet beyond the solar system for a rescue operation. Ships capable of traveling such distances existed mostly on paper, and the soldiers and crews were trained for defense, not for navigating unknown dangers in distant worlds. Every challenge, every risk needed careful planning. Inside the command centers, the atmosphere was tense. Engineers, scientists, and military strategists worked together around large tables filled with schematics, maps, and simulation screens. Each person understood that even the smallest mistake could have catastrophic consequences. They debated endlessly over the best approach. Should they send a single ship first, lightly equipped just to observe? Or should they send a full fleet, heavily armed to ensure the safety of both Earth's crew and the SOS planet? The arguments were intense, but slowly consensus emerged. Speed and strength were both necessary. The crews chosen for the mission were exceptional. They were not just soldiers or pilots. They were engineers, medics, communication experts, and strategists, all trained to work as a team in the most extreme circumstances. When the names were announced, there was a mix of pride and anxiety. Each person knew they were part of something historic, but they also knew the risks. They would leave behind families, friends, and the familiarity of Earth. Once they crossed the edges of the solar system, the chances of turning back were slim. Training intensified. Crew members spent long hours running simulations that tested not just technical skill, but mental resilience. They learned to operate under extreme stress, making decisions in seconds that could save or cost lives. They practiced communication in silence, using gestures and signals in case electronic devices failed. They rehearsed medical procedures that might be needed on an alien world. Every exercise reminded them of the enormity of what lay ahead. At the same time, the ships themselves were being prepared. Engineers modified engines for extended travel. reinforced shields to withstand unknown hazards, and stocked every vessel with supplies to last months, possibly years. Every detail was considered, from the strength of the hull to the nutritional content of the food rations. Nothing could be left to chance. Even small mistakes could become deadly in the vast emptiness of space. As the preparations progressed, some scientists worked on understanding the SOS signal itself. They analyzed its structure, trying to learn as much as possible about the beings who had sent it. Every bit of information helped. The signal suggested an advanced but fragile civilization. Their technology was far behind Earth's, and their survival depended entirely on outside intervention. The more researchers studied it, the more the urgency grew. Time was slipping away, and the SOS planet might not last much longer if help did not arrive quickly. Amid the tension and planning, the human side of the mission came into focus. Crew members were not robots. They worried about their loved ones, felt fear, and wondered if they were truly ready for what awaited them. Families said their goodbyes in quiet moments, trying to hide their worry. Some cried, others held hands tightly, but all understood the importance of what was happening. This mission was not about personal glory. It was about responsibility, courage, and doing the right thing when no one else could. Political leaders faced their own challenges. They had committed resources, funds, and lives to an uncertain mission. Debates continued in private meetings. Some feared backlash if the mission failed, or if the act of helping another civilization angered unknown enemies. Others argued that inaction was morally impossible. Ignoring a plea for help simply because it came from afar was unacceptable. In the end, humanity's decision rested on the belief that helping others was not only possible but necessary, even when the cost was unknown. As the days passed, the crew began to understand the scale of what awaited them. Simulations could not prepare them fully for reality, and the unknown loomed like a shadow. Yet even in the fear and uncertainty there was hope. They carried the hopes of their own civilization and the lives of those reaching out for help. That dual responsibility strengthened them. Every check of systems, every test run, every briefing was another step toward readiness. Finally, after weeks of preparation, the moment arrived. The fleet gathered in formation at the edge of the solar system. The engines hummed, shields glowed faintly, and sensors scanned the surrounding space. Crew members took their positions, hearts pounding, knowing that what came next would define them and perhaps all of humanity. They were ready, or as ready as anyone could be when stepping into the unknown. The departure was both somber and electrifying. Earth watched as its fleet of warriors moved into the darkness, leaving behind everything familiar. Cities held their breath, people stared at the skies, and scientists monitored every detail of the launch. For the first time, humanity was extending its presence beyond the solar system for a purpose other than exploration or conquest. This was a mission of compassion and courage. As the fleet accelerated, crossing vast distances that would take years to traverse, crew members adjusted to the rhythm of space travel. Days and nights blurred into cycles of work, rest, and preparation. They practiced drills, maintained equipment, and continued studying the SOS planet's signals, trying to anticipate what challenges might await them. Each message from the distant planet reminded them of why they were there. It was not a mission of curiosity or ambition. It was a mission of survival and hope. Communication with Earth became intermittent as the ships moved further from the solar system. Messages took longer to arrive, sometimes days or weeks. The distance brought isolation, and with isolation came introspection. Crew members thought about their families, their lives, and the enormity of what they were attempting. They understood that this mission would test not only their skill, but also their humanity. Even as they traveled, they encountered small challenges. Equipment failed, minor accidents occurred, and unexpected cosmic phenomena tested their training. But each challenge strengthened the crew's resolve. They learned to work together, to rely on one another in ways they had never imagined. Every problem solved became proof that they were ready to face whatever awaited on the SOS planet. Throughout it all, the SOS signal persisted. It was faint now, stretching across unimaginable distances, but it remained a constant reminder of why they had left home. That simple cry, "Help us," resonated deeply with every person aboard the fleet. It was a call not just for survival, but for connection, for recognition that life in the universe mattered, and that those who could help should. As the fleet moved closer to the target system, anticipation grew. The unknown was no longer theoretical. Soon the crew would see the planet, meet its inhabitants, and understand the full scope of the threat. They were ready to face the consequences of their decision, to act with courage and determination, and to fulfill the promise that Earth would not ignore a plea for help. The journey had begun as a response to a distant signal, but it had evolved into something far greater. It was a journey that would define humanity, test its limits, and reveal what it truly meant to be a protector, a warrior, and a friend across the stars. The SOS had sparked action, and humanity had answered with preparation, commitment, and resolve. What lay ahead was uncertain, but the resolve of Earth's warriors was unwavering. For now they traveled in silence and focus, ready to meet whatever awaited them. They carried not only weapons and equipment, but hope, compassion, and the unspoken promise that when someone called for help, Earth would answer. The first step of the journey had been taken, but the real challenge, the encounter with the SOS planet and its unknown dangers, was yet to come. And in the quiet moments, as the stars streamed past the windows of the fleet, each crew member thought of the distant world sending its plea, imagining lives hanging in balance, and understood the meaning of the mission in their hearts. They were not just voyagers. They were hope in motion, a living promise that Earth would reach out across the void to protect and to help. The journey through space was unlike anything the crew had ever experienced. The stars stretched endlessly in every direction, a glittering canvas that was both beautiful and intimidating. Despite all their training and simulations, the reality of traveling for months and even years through cold emptiness tested everyone on the fleet. Time lost its usual meaning. Days and nights blended together. The silence of space pressed in, a constant reminder that they were far from home and far from anyone who could help if something went wrong. Every day was filled with work. The crews monitored engines, shields, and life support systems. They practiced drills and ran simulations to keep skills sharp, knowing that once they arrived at the SOS planet, there would be no room for mistakes. The ships were equipped with advanced technology, but machines could only do so much. Human judgment, quick thinking, and teamwork were what would make the difference. Even in the routine, the human mind wandered. Crew members thought about the planet sending the SOS. They imagined the people or creatures who were relying on them. Were they in cities, hiding in shelters, or clinging to life in the wild? The uncertainty was almost unbearable. Every person aboard carried not only their own hopes and fears, but the weight of an entire civilization's survival. Isolation brought its own challenges. Conversations turned from casual talk to deeper, sometimes uncomfortable topics. Crew members shared their fears, their doubts, and their memories of life back on Earth. Some cried quietly in private. Others struggled to sleep, the thought of the unknown haunting their dreams. Psychologists on the fleet guided them through these emotions, reminding them that courage was not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. At times, the crew encountered cosmic phenomena that tested their skills. Meteor showers streaked across the void, forcing quick adjustments to shields and navigation. Unpredictable solar winds and magnetic storms required constant attention. Each obstacle, while manageable, reminded them of the fragility of life in space and the stakes of their mission. A single miscalculation could mean disaster, and everyone aboard understood that failure was not an option. Food and supplies were carefully rationed, designed to last the entire journey. Meals became more than just nourishment. They were a small comfort, a reminder of Earth and life as it had always been. Crew members took turns sharing stories, laughing softly, and trying to keep spirits high. These moments, though brief, strengthened bonds. Trust and unity were more important than ever. In space, no one could act alone. The SOS signal, faint as it was, continued to guide them. Each pulse reminded the crew of the urgency of their mission. They studied it constantly, trying to extract any information that might help them prepare. Its pattern suggested distress, fear, and a hope that someone would come. The simple words, "Help us," echoed in the minds of everyone aboard, growing heavier with each passing day. Some nights, the crew would gather in small groups to observe the stars outside. They spoke quietly about the possibility of meeting the beings who had sent the signal. What would they look like? How would they communicate? Could they even understand each other? The questions were endless, but they also fueled determination. This mission was not just about technology or strategy. It was about connection, about reaching across unimaginable distances to save lives. The psychological strain was immense. The vast emptiness of space had a way of magnifying small fears. Every shadow in a control room, every unusual reading on a monitor, could feel like a threat. Crew members relied on one another, talking through doubts, sharing observations, and reminding each other of the mission's importance. They learned to trust instincts, to notice small details, and to act decisively even under stress. Despite the challenges, moments of wonder appeared. Comets blazed across the sky in brilliant streaks. Distant planets glowed with mysterious light, and stars seemed close enough to touch. These moments reminded the crew why exploration and courage mattered. They were not just fighting for survival. They were witnessing the universe in its full, breathtaking scale. The beauty and danger of space were intertwined, a constant reminder of both the fragility and strength of life. Weeks turned into months. Communication with Earth grew slower and less frequent as the fleet moved further from home. The isolation was profound, but it also forged a sense of independence. The crew could not rely on anyone else to make decisions or solve problems. Every choice, every action was theirs alone. It was a trial of leadership, patience, and perseverance. Supplies were monitored carefully. Engineers worked tirelessly to ensure that engines ran smoothly and shields remained intact. Every day brought a small victory, a reassurance that the fleet could endure the long journey. The mental and physical discipline of the crew became as important as any piece of technology aboard. And then, signs of the SOS planet system began to appear. Sensors picked up gravitational anomalies, asteroid belts, and faint readings of planetary activity. The crew leaned over displays trying to interpret every signal. Excitement mixed with anxiety. They were close. Soon they would see the planet for themselves, and the unknown challenges would become reality. Crew members began reviewing emergency protocols in detail. They prepared for landing, for first contact, and for combat scenarios if necessary. Every possible situation was analyzed. What if the planet's environment was hostile? What if the inhabitants were already injured or frightened? What if the SOS had been a warning of danger they could not yet see? Questions were endless, but preparation was their only defense. The closer they got, the stronger the signal became. The words "help us" now carried a weight that was almost tangible. Crew members could feel urgency pulsing through every system aboard the fleet. It was no longer a distant cry, it was immediate, pressing, real. Everyone understood that their next actions would determine the fate of an entire civilization. As the planet came into view, awe and fear mingled. It was smaller than Earth, with vast landscapes, mountains, and seas. But something was wrong. Sensors detected areas of destruction, fires, and energy surges that suggested conflict. The crew realized that the SOS was not just a request for assistance, it was a warning. The planet was under attack and the threat was real. Leadership became critical. Commanders held briefings discussing strategy, assigning roles, and making final preparations. Every decision had to be precise. Every move could be the difference between saving the planet or failing entirely. Crew members felt the weight of responsibility on their shoulders, but they also felt a deep sense of purpose. This mission was not just history, it was life and death, and they were at the center of it. Fear and anticipation were constant companions. The crew slept in shifts, monitored systems, and rehearsed protocols repeatedly. Each person felt the pressure, but also the honor of being chosen. They were stepping into history, carrying the hopes of their own planet and those who had reached out in desperation. Finally, as the fleet entered the orbit of the SOS planet, a new reality unfolded. The planet's cities were in ruins. Smoke rose from forests and urban areas alike. The inhabitants were visible from orbit, scattered, frightened, and overwhelmed. It was clear that the threat they faced was enormous, far beyond anything the crew had simulated. Yet there was also hope. The SOS had been answered. Humanity had arrived, ready to act. The final approach demanded focus and precision. Pilots navigated past debris, storms, and damaged areas, coordinating with teams on the ships to ensure a safe entry. Every movement had to be calculated. The first glimpse of the planet's surface revealed devastation but also resilience. There were pockets of life, communities huddled together waiting for help. As the fleet prepared to descend, the crew felt the weight of everything they had experienced during the journey. The months of travel, the isolation, the fear, the anticipation, it had all led to this moment. They were no longer observers of the SOS signal. They were participants in the rescue, and the outcome rested in their hands. The final words from command echoed through the fleet. "This is it. We are here. Remember your training, your purpose, and your humanity. We go not to conquer, but to protect. Let's bring hope where there was fear." Silence fell for a moment as everyone absorbed the words. Then, with engines humming and shields active, the fleet began its descent toward the planet, moving into the unknown with determination, courage, and a promise to save those who had cried out for help. When the fleet finally descended through the planet's atmosphere, the scene that greeted the crew was unlike anything they had imagined. From orbit, the devastation had been visible, but nothing could prepare them for the scale of destruction on the ground. Entire cities lay in ruins, buildings reduced to rubble, streets scorched and littered with debris. Fires still burned in some areas, and plumes of smoke rose into the sky, marking the spots where life had been torn apart. The SOS planet was alive with chaos. Its inhabitants, small in size compared to humans, scurried through the wreckage. Some were injured. Others carried belongings hastily grabbed from ruined homes, and many simply stood frozen, eyes wide with fear. The distress that had traveled across light years to reach Earth was clear in every movement, every expression. The urgency of the SOS was not just a warning. It was a plea from beings whose world was literally crumbling around them. The first wave of Earth's warriors landed cautiously, keeping scanners active and weapons ready. Every detail mattered. The streets were dangerous, unstable, and unpredictable. Dust and smoke made visibility low, and pockets of fire threatened to spread further. But despite the danger, the crews moved with precision, trained to act in environments far more hazardous than anything on Earth. Their mission was simple in words but complicated in practice. Locate the inhabitants, assess the damage, and provide immediate help while preparing for any hostile threats. As they moved through the city, they encountered the planet's residents directly, fear and awe mixed on both sides. The inhabitants had never seen humans before, and the sight of beings so large, so imposing, was overwhelming. Yet at the same time, the SOS planet's residents recognized the intent behind the humans' arrival. They understood that these newcomers were there to help, and slowly, fear began to give way to cautious hope. Medical teams deployed immediately. Injured inhabitants were tended to as swiftly as possible. Broken limbs were stabilized, burns treated, and exhausted beings offered nourishment and water. The Earth crews worked tirelessly, often side by side with the planet's own inhabitants who could assist. Even in chaos, humanity's instinct to save lives was clear. Every life saved became a small victory, a tangible proof that they had crossed the stars for a purpose worth fighting for. At the same time, reconnaissance teams spread out to understand the nature of the disaster. They discovered that the planet had been attacked not by natural forces, but by a technologically advanced enemy. Machines and vehicles far beyond the capabilities of the SOS planet's inhabitants had rained destruction from the sky, leaving the population powerless. Entire regions had been wiped out, and it was clear that without intervention what remained would not survive long. The inhabitants tried to explain in hurried gestures and sounds what had happened. It became evident that their civilization had no effective defense against the invaders. They had tried to resist, but their technology and numbers were insufficient. They had sent the SOS because they knew no one else could help them, and Earth's arrival was a lifeline. Every member of the fleet felt the weight of responsibility. This was no longer an abstract mission. Lives depended on them, and every decision carried consequence. The crews also had to face the psychological impact of the devastation. Buildings that once housed families were nothing more than charred skeletons. Playgrounds, schools, and markets lay in ruins. Fires crackled across landscapes that had once been thriving communities. The scale of the destruction made the mission urgent, but it also reminded the crew of what was at stake and why they had left Earth in the first place. Despite the chaos, the inhabitants began to show signs of resilience. Small groups gathered in the cleared spaces, offering assistance where they could. Humans and SOS planet residents worked together to lift debris, move injured to safe areas, and secure supplies. Even in the face of disaster, there was cooperation, a silent acknowledgement that survival required unity. As the day progressed, scouts reported sightings of the invading forces. They were unlike anything Earth's crews had encountered before. Mechanical units with weaponry far more advanced than what the planet's inhabitants possessed. Their presence explained the devastation, but it also introduced a new level of danger. Any misstep could provoke a counterattack, putting both Earth's warriors and the SOS planet residents at risk. Strategic planning became essential. Commanders organized defensive positions while continuing rescue operations. Teams set up barriers, deployed surveillance drones, and coordinated with medical units. Every person on the fleet had a role. Some fought to secure locations, others treated the wounded, and some worked to repair damaged infrastructure. Coordination, speed, and clear thinking were essential. Chaos could not dominate. Humanity had to demonstrate order, precision, and decisiveness. Communication with Earth became secondary as the crews focused on immediate priorities. The distance was too great for real-time updates, and decisions had to be made independently. Every leader on the ground had to rely on judgment, experience, and intuition. The training they had received for months, the simulations run countless times, now proved invaluable. There was no room for hesitation. Every second mattered. As the fleet moved deeper into the city, they discovered areas where survivors had been hiding. Some were trapped under debris, unable to move for hours or days. Earth's warriors worked carefully to extract them, using tools designed for precision and safety. Every successful rescue was celebrated quietly but profoundly, a reminder that hope could exist even in the most devastated environments. Despite the challenges, bonds were forming between humans and the inhabitants. The SOS planet's residents began to mimic the humans' methods for clearing rubble and tending the injured. Small gestures of communication, smiles, and cautious cooperation demonstrated trust beginning to build. The fleet realized that their mission was not only to save lives, but also to foster confidence and hope among those they were rescuing. At the same time, reconnaissance revealed signs of larger-scale destruction beyond the immediate city. Forests had been burned, energy grids destroyed, and key infrastructure obliterated. The invaders were organized, deliberate, and ruthless. Earth's crews understood that they were facing not just an immediate disaster, but a strategic threat. The mission had expanded from rescue to defense, from saving individuals to protecting an entire planet. As night fell on the SOS planet, the survivors gathered in safer areas established by the humans. Fires burned gently in controlled areas to provide warmth, and temporary shelters were set up for the injured and displaced. The fleet maintained vigilance. Scouts patrolled the outskirts, and surveillance drones scanned for any approaching enemy forces. The first night was tense, but it also marked a turning point. The inhabitants realized that they were not alone and that help had arrived when it mattered most. During this time, Earth's crews reflected on the gravity of their mission. The SOS signal had been clear, and humanity's response had brought hope. Yet they knew the danger was not over. The invaders could strike again, and their technology was far superior to the SOS planet's defenses. Preparation for further engagement was necessary, but so was patience. Acting recklessly could undo the progress made and endanger lives. Even in the midst of destruction, there were moments of human connection. A child who had been trapped under debris was comforted by a medic, and their relieved smile sparked joy among the crew. Survivors shared small acts of gratitude, gestures of trust, and tentative signs of hope. These moments reminded the fleet that their mission was more than a military operation. It was an affirmation of the value of life, compassion, and solidarity across worlds. As dawn approached, the fleet continued its work. Teams rotated between rescue, defense, and reconnaissance. Every individual understood the stakes, and every action contributed to the greater goal. Earth's presence was no longer just a distant hope. It was tangible, visible, and effective. The inhabitants had been given a fighting chance, and the SOS signal that had traveled light years had finally been answered. By the end of the day, the crews had accomplished remarkable feats. Many had been rescued, areas of the city were stabilized, and the survivors had begun to organize themselves under the guidance of Earth's warriors. Yet the invaders had not been fully confronted, and the threat remained. The mission had shifted once again, from answering a plea for help to preparing for a confrontation that could decide the fate of the planet. Even as fatigue set in, the crew remained alert. They knew that the SOS planet's survival depended not just on their strength but on their resolve, intelligence, and teamwork. The destruction they had witnessed was sobering, But it also fueled determination. The inhabitants were alive, hope had returned, and humanity had proven that it could act decisively when life hung in the balance. The first day on the SOS planet had been overwhelming, exhausting, and dangerous. Yet it had also been inspiring. The cries that had traveled across the stars had been answered, and for the first time since the invasion began, the inhabitants saw a future where survival was possible. Earth's warriors had shown not only strength but compassion, a combination that offered the SOS planet a fighting chance. As the sun set over the ruined landscape, the fleet prepared for the night and the challenges ahead. The calm that had settled over the SOS planet after the first day of rescue work was fragile. As night faded into morning, the fleet received updates from reconnaissance teams. The invaders were regrouping. Their machines moved silently through the ruined cities, scanning for any signs of survivors and preparing for another strike. The threat that had already caused so much destruction was not finished. Humanity's warriors understood that they could no longer focus only on rescue. They had to confront the enemy directly. Commanders called a meeting aboard the central ship. Every leader of the fleet was present, reviewing intelligence and coordinating strategy. The invaders' technology was unlike anything Earth's crews had faced before. Heavy mechanical units armed with energy weapons and faster-than-expected aerial machines made a direct confrontation dangerous. Yet retreat was impossible. The lives of thousands of inhabitants, already traumatized and vulnerable, depended on their courage. Plans were made quickly but carefully. The fleet divided into teams, one to defend the survivors in key locations, one to engage the invaders head-on, and another to provide medical and logistical support. Every action had to be precise. Every person aboard the fleet knew that hesitation could cost lives. For many, it was their first real combat in an unknown world. But training, teamwork, and a clear sense of purpose gave them strength. The first encounter happened in the early hours. Scouts spotted a group of invader machines moving toward a partially rebuilt district where many survivors were sheltered. The warning came just in time. Earth's warriors moved into defensive positions using terrain, debris, and whatever cover was available to slow the enemy. Even before combat began, coordination and communication were crucial. Crews had practiced for months for scenarios like this, but nothing could fully prepare them for the intensity of battle in a real city under siege. The clash was immediate and fierce. Explosions lit the streets as energy weapons fired, lighting up smoke and dust in the early morning light. Humans and the planet's inhabitants watched in awe and fear as the fleet engaged the invaders. Every maneuver had to be calculated. Stray shots could harm survivors or destroy what little infrastructure remained. Yet the warriors acted with precision and determination, using strategy, teamwork, and courage to turn the tide against a technologically superior enemy. The planet's inhabitants began assisting where they could. Some helped carry the wounded to safer areas, while others provided information about enemy movements. Their knowledge of the terrain became invaluable. Humans realized that this was not just a battle of strength, but of collaboration and adaptability. The invaders may have been powerful, but Earth's crews had intelligence, planning, and the determination to protect life. As the battle continued, the crews faced unexpected challenges. Some enemy machines were faster than anticipated, capable of sudden strikes that tested reflexes and strategy. Others were heavily armored, requiring coordinated attacks to disable. Every encounter was tense, demanding quick thinking and teamwork. Yet even under fire, humans remained focused, not just on defeating the enemy but on protecting the vulnerable. Rescue and combat occurred side by side, a delicate balance that demonstrated the complexity of their mission. In the midst of battle, moments of human courage shone brightly. A medic sprinted across an open street, dodging enemy fire, to reach an injured inhabitant trapped under rubble. Soldiers coordinated to draw the enemy's attention away, allowing the medic to succeed. Elsewhere, engineers quickly repaired damaged shields, ensuring that other crew members could continue the fight safely. Each act, though small in the grand scale of the battle, contributed to the survival of countless lives. The invaders, realizing they faced unexpected resistance, intensified their attack. Flying units swooped down, energy beams cut through the air, and ground machines advanced in coordinated waves. Yet the fleet's discipline and adaptability countered every move. Using advanced sensors, predictive algorithms, and teamwork, the humans anticipated enemy maneuvers, striking decisively while minimizing collateral damage. Their combination of strategy and compassion was their greatest strength. Hours of combat passed. The streets of the city became a chaotic mix of destruction and resilience. Fires were fought alongside enemy machines, survivors were guided to safety, and the SOS planet's inhabitants gradually regained hope as they witnessed the humans' skill and determination. Despite exhaustion and danger, the fleet never wavered. Every member understood the stakes. Failure was not an option. Lives hung in the balance, and Earth's warriors had vowed to protect them. As the day progressed, it became clear that the invaders had underestimated the humans. The fleet's combination of technology, strategy, and moral determination was more powerful than expected. Teams worked in perfect coordination, covering each other's movements and rescuing survivors even while under fire. The invaders' attacks became disorganized in the face of such focused resistance. The psychological impact on the SOS planet's inhabitants was profound. For the first time since the invasion began, they saw that help was not just a distant hope but a reality. Humans fought not only to defeat the invaders but to protect life. Fear began to turn into cautious optimism. Survivors who had huddled in fear began assisting where they could, moving supplies, guiding warriors through safer paths, and supporting one another. Humanity's presence had rekindled hope in a population that had almost lost it entirely. By evening, the battle had shifted. The invaders were retreating, their lines broken, their machines disabled or destroyed. The fleet's careful planning, courage, and coordination had paid off. Earth's warriors had not only protected survivors but had also gained the upper hand. Yet they knew the threat was not completely eliminated. The invaders were still out there, regrouping and potentially planning another strike. Preparation and vigilance remained essential. In the aftermath, crews focused on recovery. Injured inhabitants were treated, emergency shelters were reinforced, and reconnaissance teams assessed remaining threats. The city, though damaged, was safer. Survivors began organizing themselves under guidance from humans, and small signs of rebuilding appeared. The first day of direct combat had been brutal, but it had also proven that the SOS planet could survive with Earth's help. Amid the exhaustion, moments of reflection emerged. Crew members shared quiet conversations about what they had seen and done. Many spoke of the fear, the intensity, and the weight of responsibility, but they also spoke of hope, courage, and the humanity they had witnessed in the planet's inhabitants. They had arrived as strangers, but through action, compassion, and skill, they had become protectors, allies, and friends. The night brought temporary calm, but the fleet remained vigilant. Patrols were established, drones continued to scan for enemy movement, and defensive measures were strengthened. Humanity had intervened, but the fight was ongoing. Crew members rested in shifts, sharing stories of the day, planning for tomorrow, and reflecting on the impact of their mission. The battle had been won, but the war to secure the planet was far from over. Even in exhaustion, the crew understood the significance of their actions. The SOS that had traveled light years to reach Earth had been answered. The lives they had saved, the communities they had protected, and the hope they had rekindled were proof that courage and compassion could overcome fear and destruction. The invaders had been pushed back, but more importantly, humanity had shown that life, no matter how distant or different, mattered. As dawn approached, the fleet prepared for the next phase. The city was stabilized, but rescue operations continued alongside defensive readiness. Every person on the fleet understood that this mission was bigger than themselves. They had not come to conquer or dominate. They had come to protect, to save, and to restore hope. The day ended with survivors gathering near the fleet's command center, offering quiet gestures of gratitude. Their faces, once marked by fear and despair, now reflected cautious hope. Humanity's intervention had turned a dire situation into a chance for survival. Every crew member felt the weight and reward of their work. They had not only fought for life, they had demonstrated that help, when truly needed, could arrive, even across the vastness of space. And as the night settled over the SOS planet, the fleet remained alert, ready for any further attacks, and ready to continue the fight. The mission was far from over, but the first decisive victory had been won. Humanity had answered the SOS, protected the vulnerable, and begun to restore hope in a world on the brink of destruction. The battle had tested courage, skill, and humanity. It had shown that even in the face of overwhelming odds, cooperation, strategy, and compassion could prevail. And it had sent a clear message across the stars. When cries for help are heard, Earth will answer, not with hesitation, but with warriors prepared to protect life at any cost. The battle had ended, but the SOS planet was far from safe. The invaders had retreated for now, but signs of their presence remained everywhere. Broken machines littered the streets, scorched marks scarred the cities, and fires still burned in some remote areas. Despite the chaos, a sense of relief settled over the survivors and the human crew. For the first time in days, fear was no longer constant. Humanity had arrived, fought, and saved countless lives. The first priority was rebuilding and recovery. Earth's crews worked tirelessly, coordinating with the SOS planet's inhabitants to restore order. Medical teams treated the wounded, engineers repaired damaged infrastructure, and supply units distributed food and water. Even small acts of reconstruction brought hope. Clearing a collapsed street, putting out a lingering fire, or repairing a communication tower reminded everyone that life could continue, that survival was possible. The inhabitants were cautious but willing to help. They began organizing themselves under guidance from the humans, forming teams to assist in rescue, cleanup, and restoration. Despite the trauma they had suffered, they showed resilience. For many, the arrival of Earth's fleet had not only saved their lives but also inspired a renewed sense of strength. They had seen proof that hope could exist even in the darkest moments. Earth's crews also took time to understand the needs of the SOS planet. Scientists and engineers studied damaged structures, energy systems, and technology left behind by the invaders. They worked to repair critical infrastructure, while teaching the inhabitants how to maintain it themselves. This was not just about restoring the planet. It was about empowering its people to protect themselves in the future. Knowledge, they realized, could be as important as strength. At the same time, the human warriors took a moment to reflect. Months of travel, combat, and crisis had tested them in ways they could never have imagined. They had faced fear, isolation, and chaos, but they had also seen courage, compassion, and determination at their best. The SOS planet had shown them that life, no matter how different or distant, was worth every risk. Every rescued life was a reminder that their mission mattered, and that their presence could truly change the course of history. Communication with Earth remained slow due to the immense distances, but messages finally arrived. Reports of success, updates on the survivors, and encouragements from home reached the crews. Hearing Earth's voices reassured them, but also reminded them of the responsibility they carried. They were far from home, acting independently, but representing humanity as a whole. Every action, every decision reflected on Earth, and the stakes had never been higher. As the days passed, the planet began to stabilize. Fires were extinguished, debris cleared, and temporary shelters transformed into more permanent structures. Children who had been hiding or trapped returned to play in the cleared areas, their laughter a small but powerful signal that life continued. Adults, previously paralyzed by fear, began rebuilding homes, repairing technology, and preparing for a future that now seemed possible. The invaders were gone for now, but reconnaissance continued. Earth's crews set up monitoring systems, establishing early warning networks to detect any return of hostile forces. Defensive measures were reinforced, combining the planet's limited resources with Earth's advanced technology. The inhabitants began to learn from the humans, understanding how to protect themselves and their cities. Trust had been built, and cooperation had become a cornerstone of survival. Psychologically, the mission had lasting effects on everyone. Survivors of the SOS planet had witnessed firsthand the dedication and courage of humans who came across light years to save them. Fear had been replaced slowly but surely by hope. The SOS signal that had once been a desperate plea was now a story of salvation, proof that help could arrive when most needed. And for Earth's warriors, the mission had tested their endurance, compassion, and humanity in ways no simulation could replicate. Reconstruction was not just physical, it was emotional and social as well. Support teams helped survivors process trauma, offering counseling and guidance. Groups were formed to provide comfort and teach practical skills, while others focused on documenting the destruction to learn from it. Education, medical care, and mental health became priorities alongside physical recovery. Humanity's presence had sparked not only survival but also renewal. Over time, small victories began to accumulate. Communication networks were restored. allowing messages to travel across the planet. Water and food distribution systems became reliable. Communities started organizing governance structures, with the humans advising but letting the inhabitants lead. The planet was no longer defenseless. Earth's warriors had arrived as rescuers, but were leaving behind knowledge and tools for independence. The SOS planet's inhabitants began to show gratitude in quiet, meaningful ways. They shared meals, helped transport supplies, and offered assistance to Earth's crews wherever possible. Mutual respect and trust grew steadily. Humans were no longer just outsiders. They had become partners, allies, and friends. The planet, once on the brink of annihilation, now had a chance to rebuild and thrive. Even as calm settled over the planet, humans knew their work was not entirely complete. Strategic planning continued to prevent future attacks. Scouts monitored the skies and defensive systems were tested regularly. The invaders had been strong, organized, and ruthless, and Earth's crews understood that vigilance was essential. They had won the immediate battle, but the long-term safety of the SOS planet required preparation, knowledge transfer, and constant attention. Moments of reflection were common. Crew members walked through the restored streets, observing the changes they had helped create. Children played safely, families reunited, and small markets reopened. The laughter, conversation, and movement were signs that life had returned, that hope had been rekindled. Humans had crossed vast distances to respond to a cry for help, and the results were undeniable. Lives saved, communities strengthened, and a civilization given another chance. The bond between humans and the inhabitants grew stronger. Together they shared stories, worked side by side, and celebrated small milestones. The SOS signal, once a distant sound of fear and desperation, had become a story of courage, collaboration, and survival. Both humans and the planet's inhabitants understood the power of action, compassion, and resilience. As preparations began for the fleet's eventual departure, a sense of completion mixed with pride and reflection. Earth's crews had fulfilled their mission. They had answered the SOS, defeated the immediate threat, and ensured that the inhabitants could survive and rebuild. The planet, once on the brink of destruction, now stood as a testament to hope, courage, and humanity's willingness to act. Before leaving, crews conducted final checks, handed over defensive systems, and ensured that the survivors had the knowledge and tools needed for future protection. Farewells were quiet but meaningful. The inhabitants expressed gratitude in ways both verbal and symbolic, gestures, gifts, and shared moments that transcended language. Trust, forged in the crucible of crisis, would remain long after humans had departed. The fleet's engines roared to life, lifting off from the planet's surface. For the crew, looking back at the SOS planet was a moment of deep satisfaction. From the devastation they had first encountered to the signs of life and hope now visible, the transformation was remarkable. Humanity had traveled across the stars to answer a plea for help, and in doing so, had proven the power of courage, collaboration, and compassion. Even as they moved away, the crew knew their mission had lasting consequences. The inhabitants would remember Earth's intervention, and the knowledge and tools they had been given would help protect the planet for generations. Humanity had not only saved lives but had also left behind a legacy of hope. The SOS signal that had traveled across light years was no longer a call for help. It was a story of salvation. Reflecting on the journey, crew members considered what they had learned. They had faced fear, isolation, and overwhelming challenges, yet they had acted with courage and compassion. They had witnessed resilience, hope, and determination in a civilization far from their own. Humanity had extended itself across the stars, demonstrating that the call for help could be answered no matter the distance, danger, or difficulty. The voyage back toward Earth was quieter but filled with reflection. Each crew member thought about the people they had saved, the battles fought, and the lives touched. They had experienced firsthand the immense responsibility that comes with power and technology, and the profound impact of acting with humanity. The mission had tested them, shaped them, and affirmed their belief in the value of life. Back on Earth, news of the SOS planet's salvation spread slowly. Scientists, leaders, and ordinary citizens listened in awe as reports came in. Humanity had crossed unimaginable distances, faced unknown dangers, and brought hope to a civilization on the brink of destruction. The story inspired, reminding everyone that courage and compassion could reach even the farthest corners of the galaxy. The fleet's journey marked the end of a chapter, but the lessons remained. Humanity had answered a call for help, faced overwhelming odds, and emerged not only victorious but stronger and wiser. They had demonstrated that across the vastness of space, life mattered, and help could arrive when